You're listening to 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, and it's Jimmy Petruzzi on the Friday Sports Show. Today, we've got some fantastic guests that are going to give us a really broad insight into contrasting areas of the game. You know, one area is going to focus on the analytical aspect of the game and some really key fundamentals that we don't often get to hear, or at least the fans of the games don't always get the opportunity to hear about what goes on behind the scenes at analytical level. So we've got one of the best in the business who's going to talk about what he does, and later on in the show we've got someone who's going to talk about what she does, incorporating strategies to help players prepare mentally. So the first guest is from all the way from Portugal, and he has an academic background as well as a practical background, studied sports science and a master's degree in training as well. At the moment he's doing a PhD. He's worked at various levels in Portugal for a youth and first team. One of the teams he worked with was CD Tondela in the First Division of Portugal, and his main area is game analysis and looking at what other teams do, which is quite fascinating. And if you get a chance to see some of the game analysis that Ricardo, who first guest, going to be on LinkedIn, they're really fascinating stuff. I watched some of the game analysis and I thought it was just fascinating how he breaks the game down. So Ricardo, Alves, thank you for coming on board the show. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you, Jimmy, for the invitation. It's my pleasure.
No, fantastic. So game analysis is something that a lot of fans, or at least in the UK, probably aren't too familiar with. They probably think, obviously it's, fans enjoy the game, they love to watch the game, but sometimes it's sort of one area to give an insight into is how in-depth professional teams prepare. And you do game analysis amongst other things. And how did you get into game analysis yourself? How did you get involved in doing game analysis?
Well, Jim, answering to that question, maybe I will answer to my life question right now at the moment, because I went to the university, like you said, and I did my bachelor degree. Then I go to my master degree. And when I was doing my bachelor degree, I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be on the field. So I started to be as an assistant coach because my main focus was to learning. And I started as an assistant coach. Then I moved on to a different ages. And then when I was in my master degree, I started to do analysis. I started to publish the analysis on the media. Then my master degree, the work I did focused mainly on game analysis of the World Cup, and then after my master degree, like most of the people are studying, they answer to that question. Now what? What I'm going to do?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you start to emailing some clubs, you start to emailing some people. I think I sent to all the clubs from the first and the second league, twice maybe, I don't know, to all of them if they got a department, if they want anyone to do game analysis. I got this example from a person, a good friend of mine, João Nuno Fonseca. He worked this season on Nantes as an assistant coach. He works to the City Group. He's a well-known analyst, and I followed his example, and I did the same. So no answer from the clubs. But then I started to do some questions to a professor of mine. And he was a goalkeeper coach from a team corresponding to the third tier. And but I asked him what I should do, what now, and he said I will see something in my club.
Yeah.
Then a few weeks later, he talked to me and he said, "Look, Ricardo, I talked to a person. But this person works in a professional club, the CD Tondela, for the first league. That person is the goalkeeper coach, and I will be with him in this day. If you want, you can come in and give him in hands a project of yours to CD Tondela, because CD Tondela is on the first league, but they don't have analysis department. And you know, I think to myself, let's do this. I will do a project for them. I will deliver the project in paper, printed in paper. I will deliver a CD too with my analysis and so on. And then I present it to that coach. That coach delivered to the technical staff. During back then, it was the coach from Tondela was T, the former international player. And his staff, T, Nuno Pereira, a good friend of mine, called me, and then it's history, you know. I got called, I did analysis of the first game of the pre-season, they liked, and I stayed in Tondela in these two last years.
It's just amazing how, you know, you showed a lot of initiative to get into the game, and that's really important, I think, for any person listening who's looking to go into game analysis. It's important that they sort of keep going, and the opportunities out there are key. And what would you say the benefits are of game analysis? People who aren't familiar with game analysis are probably wondering, you know, we can watch the game and visually, but from the point of view of game analysis, what do you think are the main benefits of the game analysis for the coaching and for the players?
Yeah, the benefits are huge, of course. But I think when you talk about the game analysis, you need to talk first about the technological revolution. You know, I think the game has changed, and I think that is because. Due to the technological evolution, because that will make the coaches, the technical staff, analyzing more the game, and even the players got their action of the game, and they analyze their actions of their game.
Yeah, that's
yes, and I think. For me, the benefits, of course, it's like if you're going to play against your opponent, you need to analyze them. You know,
absolutely.
You need to analyze their patterns of play in each moment of the game, their weaknesses, their strengths. You know, and then you have to put them in your game model. Because I think most of the people look to the game analysis to their opponents. It's not only the opponents, you know.
Yes.
To be a balance here. So you analyze the opponents. Okay, now let's talk about us, our team, because the coaches, the technical staff need to analyze if their idea, their model, their philosophy of they want to implement on the team. It's going in a right path. So you analyze the training, you analyze the matches. So it's a lot. It's a process, you know. All of that is connected. You before you speak in the opponent, you need to analyze yourself.
Yeah.
Most of the people focus in the opponent, but it's not always the opponent.
Absolutely, that's a great point you made there, and I think the thing is too is like, for example, you know, some of the areas that I've sort of, when I used to work in football full time, the areas we used to look at is like penalty shootout and see which direction players hit the penalty. Is there sort of a preference to free kicks as well, where they sort of tend to hit their free kicks? But like you said, I think a great point there is analysing our own performance, what we do well, what we need to improve. It's a huge thing, and I think the modern game, it's challenging because there's so much technology, there's so much people like yourself and psychologists and coaches and fitness trainers, and it's becoming more and more developed and harder to play in terms of, we see players sometimes, Ricardo, have one good season, then we don't see them anymore because you can analyse their performance, and if they predominantly play on the left foot or the right foot, as a performance analyst, you know, we can get the information in the coaching point of view and to be able to nullify the strengths. But have you got some examples of how, I mean, the game you analysed on LinkedIn was really, really fascinating, but have you got any other examples you can use and share with the listeners of how you've analysed the game and how you've put it into effect in terms of any experience yourself or anything that you've done before?
Yes. But talking about examples of game analysis, and you do game analysis live, for example. You go to the stadium and do live analysis, or you can do on direct analysis, or mainly on video. And of course, that's two examples complement each other. And then you have the qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis. The qualitative refers more to for example, the video analysis, the actions of the player, and the quantitative analysis refers more to the statistical process, the statistical data.
Yes.
And the analytics. Of course, all of this complement each other, and then you can make with that kind of information, quantitative, qualitative. You make a report. That report can be written or in video, or written with images and then video too. Of course, this depends of the coach. If the coach wants only written and then video, images and then video, it depends. For example, right now I'm assistant coach in the corresponding third tier of Portugal. The club is Oliveira do Hospital, and we only do video analysis. You mainly do video analysis and give to our players the patterns of play of the opponents, and then of course we do, for example, even in this week we do individual analysis. For example, we call a player, look, this action of you on the game. Okay, you did this. What do you think about this?
Yes,
we want him to answer first before we answer ourselves, the coaches, because we wanted to know what is his perception of during the game, And we asked them, you did this. What do you think about this? Why should you do another action? Okay, but you did this. Okay, this is good. You did this. Maybe you should do this. And then we try to implement that kind of the approach to the next game, because we need to be careful with sometimes with the images. And when I say careful, it's mainly because of the time we got to prepare ourselves. Because sometimes you have a huge amount of information, but not always a huge amount of information correspond to good information. So you have to filter the information and put in some quality information to give to the technical staff, to the players, and so on. And for example, like I said, video analysis, and answering to more detailed information, we codify the game moments, the patterns of play with a software. In England, you use a lot of Sport Schools, Longo Match, those kind of softwares, and then we put the videos, the clips with animations and tracking the players, and one of the best softwares, and it's one of the best, and is what I use. And thank you for Carenego for the opportunity, and especially thanks to Craig Guinness. It's the software Coach Paint, very used in England.
Yeah, no, it's interesting stuff, because many years ago, when it was sort of making its way into the game, and I had a performance coaching role at a football club in the UK, and we couldn't afford at the time. This was like going a long way back now. So what I did is I got involved with university students and got them to do some analysis for us, and they were using different programs. I think one of them, if I recall, it might have been Game Break. I can't recall, it's that long ago. But the point was, at the time, it was difficult for, say, a club, say, in the second or third tier of English football to access that. It was mainly used at Premiership level, but now we're seeing more and more clubs using it at all levels, and it's down to affordability. That's one of the reasons why I had to hook up with the university, because at that point there was no way we could afford to have that. But these days it seems to be more accessible. Ricardo, is that the case, where it's become more accessible to use game analysis for different levels in terms of affordability, or is it still hard to access for smaller clubs?
That's a good point. For example, right now, of course I cannot afford a type of software that I spend a lot of money on it. So there are various types of software, some even free. It's a freeware. But of course, if you are on the top level, of course you have to spend a little bit more. But I think with a few you can do a lot of things like right now. It's like I said before, the technology, what we call revolution, allows you to do few but huge. But of course, it's always about time. It's always about, for example, money. If you are on the lower divisions, mostly because of money, this is a problem, of course, because there are a lot of professional people out there. But right now, for example, if a club has the opportunity to have a camera, you can film the game. You can film your match, and you don't need to have a specific software to do the analysis. Now, for example, you are seeing the footage of your game after the match. You can print the screen, or you can write it down the minutes of the game and then show to the players. But if you can have the access to the footage, better for you, better for the coaches, and better for the team, because now the coach can analyze and like I said, mainly and I think the primary objective is our model, and then the opponent, and in lower levels it should be in this way.
Absolutely, that's a great thing these days, that you can tailor it to the level you're at, and obviously, you know, even if the team hasn't got a big budget, you know, you mentioned there that obviously there's software at various levels, and you know, many years ago that wasn't the case. It was sort of more exclusive for the bigger clubs, but now everyone's got the opportunity to analyse on some level, which is really important. I think it's crucial that we do get an idea of what we do well, what we need to improve on, and like you said as well, a really important point, analysing our own game is a big thing too. And what's quite interesting as well, Ricardo, is Portugal's produced obviously some great players, probably the greatest player in the modern generation, Ronaldo, but equally coaches too, you know, from, you know, dating back from Quiroz, Mourinho, Nuno over Wolverhampton now, so that's just to name a few. Is there a reason why Portugal produces these coaches? I mean, is it the education system there for coaches? Because there seem to be a pragmatic type of coach that Portugal teams tend to. I know obviously it's a generalisation, and everywhere you go there's, you know, coaches at different levels, but there seems to be, for me looking at the outside in, the Portuguese coaches seem to be really pragmatic and you know, forward thinking and really dynamic in their approach. Is that down to the education system there, the way that coaches are brought through, or is it just something that is just, you know, the way it's happened?
I think it's one thing you said. I need to agree with you, because for example, Mourinho during in back time adapt himself. He uses his methods to achieve what he achieved, and Mourinho inspired a lot of Portuguese generations to become a coach, and I think a lot of people around the world to become a coach. But I think when people talk said this, I think the Portuguese mentality of to achieve more, to the desire, the ability to adapt to every situation are the main focus in here. For example, I remember a teacher of mine did an academic research. He got a award about that academic research, and he studied the Portuguese youth teams of Carlos Queiroz, the coach Carlos Queiroz, and he said on that academic research that back then, I think it was before 2000, the year 2000. I don't know the exactly time. Portugal got champions of that tournament, but I don't have the exact.
Of course, I recall. Yeah.
And Portugal got champions, and what the Professor Carlos Queiroz did, he got the footage of the game. It was not in disc, it was in VHS. I think it's what it's called like in UK. It's a tape.
Yeah.
I think it's the correct term.
That's right, it is, the videotape, yeah.
It's before the CDs,
Yeah.
And what he did, his father worked very well with painting on the tape of the tape, and he put drawings on the tape. Imagine putting drawings on a tape, and so they can show it on the TV the analysis to his players. So this refers all. I think I don't know if I got the point here, but this shows a lot the Portuguese mentality to adapt to every situation and to do more in every context.
Yes. Absolutely.
This desire, it's huge. You can see by Mourinho. You can see by the players. For the huge one is Ronaldo. A huge example.
Yeah.
And you can see why.
No, absolutely. It's really interesting you say, Queiroz, and I think in the World Cup, for example, I think it was when Iran played Portugal, and Queiroz, you can see he did his homework on Ronaldo, and everyone before the game, I think a lot of people felt Ronaldo was going to score a number of goals, and obviously he played reasonably well, but the point being, I think that Queiroz certainly did his homework on him, and every time he got the ball, he made sure that there was someone not too far away, even before he got the ball. So you can see obviously that there was some sort of game analysis done and a game plan there. That's for sure. So I think that sort of goes to show how important it is. And I think the great thing too is it shows that you don't have to have been a top professional footballer to be a great coach. Sometimes there's a misconception you have to be this sort of ex-footballer. I think one thing that they've done, the likes of Nuno and certainly Mourinho, is demonstrated that to be a coach is different and a manager than being a player, and it shows that you don't have to be. Sometimes I think in my experience, certainly in the UK, in my experience, they look for ex-players a lot to go on to management and coaching rather than the academics of the game as well, or a blend of both. So I think that's a big thing that certainly we can take away, or at least the UK can take away. That's for sure. Is there like an academic emphasis in the game in Portugal, Ricardo? Would you say that the coaches there, like yourself,
that is of course. I think the academics it's very important, and now, for example, a lot more players are doing it when they are playing. They are going to the university and study sports science because they know that something is missing. Okay, they have the background as a football player, then they passed with a lot of coaches in their career, but they're missing some points, and the players are being conscious about that. I think for example, talking about myself, I think this is a way of being better, to learn even more, because the more you learn, the more you are able to the task.
Absolutely.
And, I think that to myself, because I always have the desire to learn even more and more every day. So I went to a bachelor degree, then to a master, and now I'm doing a PhD. I think it's fundamental because you get well prepared. I think it's the main answer. About that, to be ex-footballer, or you got a lot of examples. I think the biggest example about in Portugal is Jose Mourinho, because he wasn't a good player, and he studied, and then he achieved what he achieved, and then you got his assistant coach back then, who did analysis for him, André Villas-Boas, who coached Chelsea and Tottenham in England. He wasn't a player. He was a student. He studied sports science, and then, of course, he got the opportunity to go with Mourinho, and then he became a coach. So I think the main topic here, the more prepared you are, you're more able to do the task.
Absolutely, and I think also seeing the game objectively rather than too subjectively. I think sometimes certain ex-players, not to say ex-top players can't make good managers. Some of them go on to make good managers, but the point being, I think if you got that blend of academia, then you see objective the game. You can sort of step out of the game and sort of see it on a more objective lens rather than the emotion of subjectivity, where sometimes certain players of the past, they struggle to get the best out of other players because they expect players to do what they can do, and don't realise that we can sort of mould players and shape players. But it's a sort of fascinating insight. It's been very kind enough for you to join us, and it's been a really interesting insight for me and for the listeners, no doubt. Ricardo, it's been great having you on the show, and I certainly recommend anyone listening to go on LinkedIn and check out some of the stuff that you do. It's fascinating stuff, and I think that it's really, really interesting the way you break the game down and give that information, really, even from the point of view, from a fan point of view. It's just really intriguing to see the game being analysed in that way. But I want to thank you for coming on board the show, Ricardo, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the season and your studies. Thanks again for coming on board the show.
Thank you, Jimmy. My pleasure. Thank you.
So you're listening to 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, with myself, Jimmy Petruzzi, on the Friday Sports Show. What a fascinating guest we had, Ricardo Alves. Absolutely interesting stuff that he does in game analysis. It really is. If you get a chance to check out his work on LinkedIn, it's Ricardo Alves, all the way from Portugal, who are known for great coaches in the world of football and sport in general, and obviously producing players as well. Our next guest is interesting, really, really fascinating as well. It's an area that we often talk about in the game of sport and in football as well, yet a lot of people probably generally have got a stigma associated to the area of psychology and hypnosis and coaching in mental skills as well. Our next guest is going to talk about the work she does with top athletes and possibly dispel a few myths and stigma around using hypnosis in top flight sport. But that's not all she does. She works in other areas too. She's vastly experienced as well, and has worked in other areas too. So she does cognitive behavioural hypnotherapy. She works in surgery hypnosis, immune disorder, sports hypnosis, which we'll talk about on this show, PTSD and trauma. So she's got a broad spectrum of experience. And Louise Phillips, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Great to be here.
Fantastic. So the listeners are probably wondering at the moment, hypnosis and sports, and I'm sure they'll have heard some really, really top flight sports people and athletes talk about hypnosis, yet in saying that they've probably got the association, Louise, of stage hypnosis. Can you tell us a bit about, okay, someone, you obviously, and we'll talk about some of the people you work with shortly, but if someone calls you up to work with them, what are they looking for you to do, Louise, as a hypnotherapist?
Okay, well, I mean, I like you said, Jim, I work with all areas of hypnosis, but I do work extensively with athletes, right from amateurs, kids really, all the way up to Paralympians and champion athletes. Classically, when people contact me, it'll be because they're struggling in some way, so they might be unable to take the skill and ability that they demonstrate in their training into a match, for example. They may have had a negative experience. They may have been expected to excel in a competition, and it's just not come together. Often they're rehabilitating from injury, so their belief in their ability has kind of been shattered a bit. So, and often they'll have negative beliefs. So, as I'm sure you know, that athletes are often real perfectionists. So to perform really, really well in sport, you've got to be a perfectionist. You've got to really work hard. It takes a lot of dedication day after day. But while this is a wonderful asset, it's also a bit of a double-edged sword, because you'll often find that true perfectionists will cope very, very well when they're excelling. But of course, the moment something doesn't come together, it can really affect how they feel about themselves. And they can end up in a bit of a downward spiral. So I'll often work with them to break that cycle so that they can get right back on track, and so that they can believe in themselves once again.
Absolutely, and that's a really great point you make there. And confidence is fragile in sport. At least, we see it in football, for example, Louise, where a team scores a goal and then they build their confidence and sort of go on, but you get a goal scored against you, and it changes the whole dynamic. So these sort of pivotal moments in anyone's career are instrumental and huge, and belief is huge as well. And obviously, we go into a game believing we can win the game. But I suppose in saying that, where do you draw the line on belief in terms of, I think it's a tough one, really, belief, because, where do we draw the line? It's like, for example, if for example, someone says they'd like to, I was going to say beat Usain Bolt in the race. They probably could now if his injuries and he's retired. But you know what I mean. The point being, they've never trained before, they've never done anything before, and they sort of decide, I watched a 100-meter final on TV. I'd like to sort of run and win, and So where do you stand on that in terms of the?
I mean, there's got to be a certain amount of more than a certain amount of natural ability, of course.
Yeah.
With hypnosis, what we're able to do is to help people to achieve their full potential.
Great point.
But that said, we can't create miracles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's interesting stuff you say, Louise, about the expectation and managing expectation. Yeah. I suppose you make a really great point there, and I'm glad you made that point. It's about being the best we can be, isn't it? Really fulfilling our potential. And who knows? You might go on to be better than the person you aspire to be, or you might fall short. But what is success? Success for me is being the best you can be.
Definitely.
So the specific areas that you can help people potentially fulfill their potential. Is there any area specifically that because you've worked with some high-profile people?
I have, yeah. One of the areas I work with quite extensively is working with athletes where they're having to deal with particularly high-pressured situations. certainly when I work with fighters, for example, they'll go out there in front of a huge crowd, often in front of thousands of people, and often fights will be televised as well. So there's a lot to deal with there, because ultimately you're being subjected to the judgment of thousands and thousands of people, and it's essential that to be able to focus on the fight and to be able to really excel, that you're able to cope with that. So I work very extensively with fighters to deal with that issue. In fact, we go so far as to actually use the noise and the banter from the crowd as a powerful mental tool to help with the actual fight, and that works very, very well. But of course, this goes through into football as well. With football, each player is going out there in front of thousands and thousands of people, and particularly if it's an away game, then sometimes the attention that they're getting might not be that positive, and they've got to be able to deal with that. They've got to be able to still focus on what they're doing, on their strategies, and to demonstrate their skill, despite the fact that there's a lot going on. And this can be particularly important in a really high-pressured situation, such as playing a penalty, for example, where they've got to remain 100% focused, where everything is riding on that penalty.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, you know a lot from the work that you do.
No, that's a great point you make there.
Yeah.
It's a really great point you make there, because for the listeners who are wondering, okay, because you hear the cliche, the players have paid so much money, how could they miss a penalty and this, that, and the other, and I could have scored that, and so on and so forth. But the point being is that, it's an important point you make there, is that it's like the appraisal of the situation. So, for example, if you're playing in a huge game, a massive game, if you're playing in a massive game, Louise, where your appraisal is you've got, from the point of putting the ball on the penalty spot, you've got, say, a few seconds to run up, and what's going through your mind at that point there is the fans, the expectation, will I get this chance again? All these things are sort of going through your mind, really, and then you forget about the process. And in training, you see the players, they'll probably score 99 times out of 100 if they took a penalty. Then you get on a game, and on top of that, we're the game analyst before you on the show, and they analyse the player's performance. Where's he going to, or she going to strike the ball, and this sort of stuff. So where you come in is key to get the mind focused on the process. And is there anything specific that you do? I mean, you mentioned using the central modalities, which I think is crucial to create the experience. But is anything else that you do to
Absolutely. I look very closely at what they say to themselves, and not just in the game, but leading up to the game. So what is the narrative in their head? What are they telling them? Are they beating themselves up? Are they expecting to mess it up, quite simply? Or are they expecting to play well? How are they preparing themselves? And it's well known that anxiety creates what we call a physiological response within the body, which simply means what we think we feel. So if we're thinking anxious thoughts, if we're doubting ourselves, then we're going to be very stiff, very jerky. We're not going to think clearly. So I work very deeply with that narrative. So what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What is going on within their minds? And with hypnosis, we're able to alter that. We're able to alter that mindset. And as any good athlete will know, that mindset is absolutely key, because if you can remain calm in that situation to the exclusion of all else, if what you're telling yourself is something positive and something focused, then you're going to perform. You're going to perform to the best of your ability, and then the probability is that it's going to be a good shot, just like in the training, just like that 99 out of 100 that you were just saying about.
Absolutely. That's the quickest way to, well, one of the ways to get to the emotional state is for appraisal, that's for sure. And if you can focus on the process, and the narrative will tell you, like you said, the story's going to tell us the distortions going through the mind of the athlete.
The cognitive distortions, absolutely.
And we know in times when we're sort of suffering with confidence, that distortions become louder and faster, those thought processes telling us you're never going to do it, you're never going to win, you're not good enough. And that's also where people like yourself come in. It's sort of key, because you can be physically on top of your game and physically fit, tactically aware, technically on top of your game. But all these components are all interlinked to the mental ability to get in the right state at the right time, and that's the sort of key element. And can you tell us some of the people that you've worked with? I know you've worked in martial arts, and that's sort of, I think in sport, in mental preparation, that's probably the pinnacle, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I work extensively with Alex Reid. I also work with, like I say, a lot of other fighters. I work a lot with women boxers, interestingly. I also work a lot with professional golfers and snooker players. Unfortunately, I can't give names because I do sign fairly hefty NDAs. But yeah, I mean, those are the predominant people I work with. I also, of course, work with footballers. So. Yeah, and I work with Ironmen as well, so triathletes at the highest level, which is fantastic, and of course requires the highest level of mental toughness, essentially.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating, that. Really fascinating, and I think that the work that you do in martial arts is really intriguing. Obviously the other work you do is intriguing too, but I think in martial arts there's like when we say martial arts and fighting, there's sort of the extra component of you're in the ring, but obviously you can get hurt playing any sport, but but in that area it's sort of more evident, isn't it? You're in the ring really, and it's only you. The thing is, Louise, let's say in football, for example, you can have a bad game, but you can sort of hide behind the team, so to speak, and get away with it here and there.
You're not standing alone.
Exactly. As a martial arts, like a golfer, in one respect you're out there on your own, but obviously the difference in martial arts is, someone's coming at you. Throwing punches and kicking and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Does that ever go through the mind of some of the martial arts that you speak to? Did they ever think I could actually get hurt here or hurt?
Well, yeah, absolutely, and they do. But with martial artists, they have a very unique mindset. They essentially learn to embrace the fact that it's going to hurt. They embrace the pain. Yeah. So it's going to hurt. If you're punched or kicked, it's going to hurt. It's just part of it. We do use hypnosis to block pain up to a certain point. We never eliminate all pain, because pain is obviously a protective mechanism. However, we do block a lot of pain, because that's essential to do to perform well. We really, you have to accept, to be a good martial artist, you have to accept that you're going to get hit, you're going to get hurt, and that is all part of it. But when you go into...
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that you mentioned the pain barrier, and that's for sure sort of breaking that pain barrier. So hypnosis, as obviously you're aware, and I'm aware, and other people who practice hypnosis are aware that it's really useful for pain relief. I think you made a great point there, I think, about not nullifying it completely, because obviously pain has got sign of many things, which is not least injury as well. Obviously, if you got like a major injury you got to come off, then that's for sure you won't treat it. That's really fascinating stuff, because from the fighting point of view, it's one of them, isn't it, where it's sort of that little bit of extra edge, at least in my opinion, than other sports, because you have got people coming at you, and you get hit once, and you could get injured, but not only just injured as well. Obviously, you can lose the whole fight completely. You can have 10 good rounds, Louise, and you get hit once, and then that's the end.
Very much.
Yeah, and that's
and also it's key about how you think about your opponent as well, and it's something that a lot of fighters struggle with is hurting another person, because when you go into that cage or go into that ring, you're going to hurt that other person, and it's essential that every fighter, to be successful, that they're able to view their opponent as just somebody who's standing in their way of winning, and that is it. So to remove all emotion, and it can be quite difficult when you work with a fighter who has been on the circuit for quite some time, because often the person they may be fighting is somebody they know, somebody they view as a friend. Yeah. So you have to teach them to be able to remove all emotion, so that when they're in that situation, they don't view them in that way. All that person is somebody who is standing in their way. And again, that's a very unique mindset. Yeah. One of the ways we deal with that is by creating alter egos. So Alex Reid, for example, is the Reidnator, and most fighters will have an alter ego of some kind. And as well as being a great marketing ploy, this is a really great way of creating a shift in your mindset, so that when you're out of the cage and out of the ring, you can just revert back to being yourself, the normal person you are, and not continue with that aggression and that mindset. But also because then when you're in the cage or in the ring, you can really take down all those barriers and go in there and be on the attack and be offensive and not feel uncomfortable about it. Because all it needs is that second of hesitation for your opponent to get that punch or to get that kick in. And like you touched on earlier, that can be that one punch or kick that can end that fight and mean that you're defeated. So it's absolutely essential.
Yeah, it's a really good point there, and certainly for the listeners listening in, and one of the points you've made there is key, because sometimes, you know, some of these fighters have grown up with the opponents, but and not only that, they've also sparred and you know, in some of them at some point in their career have been in the same boxing camp too, or fighting camp, and all of a sudden, you know, someone you've known since 5-year-old or 10-year-old, you've known like for the best part of all your life, you're sort of fighting against them, and innately it's a sort of challenge. But like you says, it is a sport, and that's the sort of thing. It is a sport, and we all want to do the best we can in sport. And I think that's where all these things come into the mind. And if you're not 100%, if you're not 100%, 110%, it just takes a little bit of a margin. You know, you go out there in that sort of first round, and you can prepare, and the extensive preparation they do for a fight is phenomenal, as you well know. It's just they train, and then, you know, it's all on the night, really. These are key elements, and that's pretty much for a lot of sports, really. I suppose, I mean, fighting's a bit unique because obviously, you know, you get that one shot. I suppose with a team sport, or even an individual sport, if you're playing different tournaments and weekly sports, then you can put things right. But fighting, that's it. It's pretty much make or break, isn't it? Where, you know, it's a one-off, and you lose that, you don't get a shot for the title for years, if ever again. And that's really key. Do you find that, Louise, testing yourself in that arena as a hypnotherapist, mental skills coach, did you find testing yourself in that arena sort of brought you on as well, as in terms of your own ability? Did you find like...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a runner, and I run marathons, and for me to develop that mental toughness has been invaluable, because you know, you have to be able to get into the mindset of whoever you are with, because if you can't understand their mindset, then you can't be effective as a therapist. It's that simple. So certainly I've been able to use what I use with my clients, with my fighters, and with all my athletes for myself, and it's been absolutely invaluable, especially with recovering from injury, and also that mental toughness, you know, when things are difficult, the tough training runs, you know, getting out when you've had work late, and then getting out there the next day when the weather's bad, and just having that mindset that I'm an athlete, this is what I do. Yeah, no,
absolutely, and the thing is, like, I mean, that's for sure. But what I meant too, Louise, is you know, testing yourself in the sense that, you know, with top athletes where, in a way, there's a lot riding on it. So it's one thing transferring, and that's fantastic, but the other side of things too, you know, it's always well documented. Sometimes, you know, we sign our confidentiality agreements, but sometimes you know, things are well documented when you're working with someone. Certainly in my experience, I admit there's been times in my career in the field where I felt a bit of pressure myself, because people are saying, well, because you kind of think, well, what you know, the expectation then of you as a therapist or hypnotherapist, precisely, and that's sort of testing yourself, you know, when you're working with high-profile people like you do, like yourself, and have done with Muay Thai champions, you know, and martial arts champions, but, you know, people are sort of digging deep and saying, well, who's this person prepared with? And that really brings you on too, doesn't it, where you sort of put your hand up and say, you know what, I'm gonna work with this person, and I'll you know, and what I like about your work is you take an element of responsibility for what you do professionally, and I think that's a great refreshing thing where you put it out there, and that's great. You know, there's an area of humbleness about the work too, and I think that's sort of key, I think, as a professional, for us to test ourselves against the best in our profession. And I think
definitely.
I think the key Louise,
No, Karen, I was literally just going to say, and I think as well, any athlete you work with, there is an element of risk there, because particularly when it's well publicised, and ideally I prefer for things not to be well publicised. Yeah. But often, athletes will talk very openly about their training, and a huge part of that is their mental training. And of course, there is always an element of risk, because all the work in the world that you do with somebody, when push comes to shove, they're the person in there who's having to put it all together.
Absolutely.
They're the person who's going to have to follow the strategies, they're going to have to stick to everything you've agreed, they're going to have to put the work in away from the therapy room. And obviously when you work with an athlete, and on occasion I work with them at a venue, but most of the work is done within the therapy room, and you have to have faith in that athlete that they're going to go out there and they're going to put the effort in away from that situation.
Absolutely. And I have a bit of a cliche, just a bit of banter over the years I've developed with different athletes and sports people and coaches. I always say, you know what, who gets the credit when they do well, who gets the blame when they do as they do. Exactly. It's like, you sort of read the newspaper to see if there's a mention, at least I've done in the past, I admit it, that they mention my name here. And
we will do that.
Why am I not being mentioned in as you do? But no, I mean, in the day, I'm like yourself. I think that I do because I love it, and I think what's really important too, what sort of strikes me too, and because we're the video analyst on the show earlier, and I talked about how for me it's not always about being a top professional in that field, and we talked about the likes of Jose Mourinho, for example, who wasn't a top professional player. I mean, he played at a decent level, but the point being, is debatably the most successful coach in the modern generation, which is ironic, really, because you've got ex-top footballers and ex-top, coaches who haven't got to the heights of the game. And I think there is, as long as you've got a basic understanding, but I think what's really important, is that you have an objective view. There's a danger that if you were, for example, a top martial artist, for example, working with martial artists, you may take into that game your own subjective view, and I think it's a good thing sometimes to sort of, to sort of have the objective view, because there's sort of there's a danger with sort of people who succeed, who sort of excelled in that specific arena, or ex-professionals, that they sort of see things and they sort of cross the line with the coaching.
Definitely. I mean, you've got to be absolutely prepared to tell people the things that nobody else will, to tell people the things that their coaches won't even tell them, because that's your job at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's my role, and in my first session with any client, I will say to them, there's a probability in our work together that I'm going to tell you things that you don't want to hear.
Precisely.
That's my job.
Precisely.
And that's a tough pill for a lot of people to follow.
Absolutely. I was doing some consultancy work one time, and sort of and just for listeners to give them a sort of an idea of what we mean, and this is a classic example where consultancy, and the manager had these sort of tactics to play with, and one or two of the players came to me and says, "What do you think about the tactics?" I said, "Well, that's not for me to comment on. What is for me to comment on is to help you execute those tactics to the best of your ability, as you do." And one or two of them said, "Well, you've worked in the game for years. You're a coach as well." I said, "But that's not my remit in this situation." And that's what I mean. Sometimes there is that danger of sort of people perceiving you as being an expert in the sort of in the actual sport itself.
Very much so. It can be quite difficult to get through to people that in actual fact I'm an expert in mindset.
Precisely.
This is what I work with, and regardless of the sport, mindset is what I specialise in. And I often work very closely with coaches, and like you, people will say to me, "Well, what about this?" And I'll say, "I'm not a coach."
Precisely.
And I often discuss things with a player, with a coach present, but I'll say to them, "Now that's for your coach to answer."
Precisely, and that's a great point. And even technically too, if you can prepare like visualization strategies for them, and you can do stuff like that around technique as well. I think the key thing is that knowing where to sort of like draw that line, and that's why I think is some of the best mind coaches are the ones who are specialists in their field, and they have enough knowledge in different fields to adapt their skills, which is key in going forward. But that's really fascinating stuff, and it's really fascinating because obviously we know how much the mind plays an impact in sport, and bringing someone like yourself can be that 1%. And I think what you've done really well is sort of dispel any myths in terms of people thinking, okay, I'm going to go see a mental skills coach, and that's I'm going to go from a certain level to it's about fulfilling your potential, I think, first and foremost.
Definitely.
And who knows where that can go. I mean, as we well know, sometimes people surprise you as well. They go beyond their expectations too, which is phenomenal stuff.
Absolutely.
But absolutely, and I think it's been a really unique insight for our listeners, Louise. It really has. I think that you've been great to come on board the show and sort of give us an insight into your work as well. And I'm sure the listeners have enjoyed hearing about the work that you do as well. And I know you're sort of you're sort of on the different social media platforms too, so they want to read more about your work as well. If they want to sort of look into your work in more detail, have you okay to share some?
Yes, I mean they can look me up on Louise Phillips Hypnotherapy.co.uk or drop me an email at info@louisephillipshypnotherapy.co.uk.
Yeah, no, yes, that's really absolutely. I would certainly recommend the listeners who are interested in the work that you do, look at some of the stuff that you're doing, and it's just fascinating stuff. It really is. I think that the mind is fascinating, and the mind in sport, and it's been a really eye-opening journey. On the show we get people across a broad range of disciplines and who play different sports, and coaches, and from analysts to coaches to participants and the like, and to have someone on board who deals in hypnotherapy is fantastic, and has probably broken down some barriers in people's perception of hypnosis and waving a wand and so on and stuff. But it's been fantastic having you on the show, Louise. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and have a fantastic weekend, and no doubt we'll speak soon.
You.
Thanks again. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jim.
Bye.
Bye.